Shalom, shalom, Jerusalem. Peace be to you. When Messiah comes to take us home, may his praise be found in you. Israel.
Alright, Shabbat Shalom again. Shabbat Shalom. And Shabbat Shalom to those who will hear this with us shortly. I want to talk about today, the message is called A Famine is Coming. It's interesting, I've been working on this message for several months and wanted to give it. I was going to actually give it right before I went to Africa, and I didn't have opportunity. I didn't really even have it all together. And with many things going on, even the Torah reading today that happened to fit this perfectly, I'm going to be reading right before what we were reading in the Torah reading in one of our scriptures. So we'll see. But I know in the first world, we see prices of food going up and we see different things, but I don't think we really see the famine that's coming. You know, there's been famines in the world before. We're going to read about famines in Scripture. But the last year or two, and particularly this year coming, they're predicting very, very grave famine that will be coming. There's been in the Horn of Africa, they said the worst famine they've had in more than 100 years. And literally, to us, like I said, it may hit your pocket more. Like here in Israel, one of the new men that's in the government started doing something good. He brought bread prices down 4%. Ain't better down 4% than up 4%. But in the bottom line, at the end of the day, if you're paying 4 shekel 80 akarot for a loaf of bread, or you're paying 4 shekel 99 akarot for a loaf of bread, it's not going to make that much of a difference. But I'm talking about areas where people are dying, where they don't have food, where they're starving to death, and literally, as we'll see in the situation in the Bible, that it can get a grave situation when these things happen. But there's a famine that's coming worldwide. It's not just something that will stay in the third world, but as we're going to see here, as you're living in a global world the way we have, in a global economy, and everything is on same-day inventories, when that global economy falls, and I've talked about this many times, that when you look at the beast in Daniel, it's one beast, but it's made of gold, and then silver, and then bronze, and then iron. You know, I mean, you can go out here and find iron anywhere. Iron is not very expensive, but you're not going to find gold anywhere. But that's the point, that Babylon that has brought this system to the whole world, and even in third world places, they're building it up, that when that head of gold goes down, we're very quickly going from the gold to the silver to the bronze to the iron. And we'll be going back to the Iron Age, to the Stone Age, so to speak, where we know in the end times it's going to be very, very difficult. And during the reign of the Anti-Messiah, it's going to be even more difficult for Yahweh's people, because we know we cannot buy and sell at that time. We're not going to be able to buy and sell at that time. So I'd like to start by reading Matthew 24. Just show this a little bit. Matthew 24 and verse 1. And going out, Yeshua left the sanctuary, and his disciples came to show him the construction of the sanctuary. But Yeshua said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, there will not be at all left one stone on a stone, which will in no way not be thrown down." And as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what is the sign of your coming in the end of the age?" So we know this is the Olivet prophecy. It's in the synoptic Gospels, or Good News, of Matthew and Mark and Luke. We know that there's a little bit different in each one that gives us a little bit different part of the story. But we know it's end time. We know this is things for the end time. And then Yeshua answers them, because he asked for the sign of his coming in the end of the age. "See that no man deceives you." And what is the biggest thing we've seen in the end time so far? Deception. That's the first thing. Thousands of congregations, thousands of doctrines, thousands of everything. And the internet, as we've talked about many times, have magnified that deception over and over and over. "For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Messiah,' and they will cause many to be deceived." Of course, everybody believes in Jesus, Yeshua, whatever you want to call him. but everybody has a different doctrine, and most of those doctrines are not the road to salvation. For you are bound to hear of revolutions and rumors of war. Talking about it in the last week or two. We have big rumors of wars that are coming, with China, with Russia, with North Korea, all these things that are up. Watch and do not be disturbed, for it is necessary that all these things happen, but it is not the end yet. So we know if war does break out very shortly, even if it turns into a world war, we know it's not the end yet. We know the beast has not even started his 42 months reign. So we know we have minimum 4 years or more, probably, as we're going to see here today. But we're at the point where we're going to start seeing many of these things. For nation will be raised against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and plagues and earthquakes against many places. And like we said, even just this year, 2013, or only in the beginning of April, there's been an unprecedented amount of odd, strange weather going on. And even in April now, that started just the first week or so, there's still freezing weather in many places. People dying of freezing to death in different things. So we see all these things. Earthquakes, major earthquakes. I'm talking about 6 and above, happening almost every day or at least every week. But all these are a beginning of sorrows. So I do believe we've entered the period of the beginning of sorrows, but the end is not yet. The end is not yet. We have time to go, and we're going to see we need to prepare. So the fact that the end is not yet isn't the time to go back to sleep, as we're going to see a very interesting parallel here today from Scripture, that Yahweh is clearly going to show us it is the time to prepare. It is the time to be watching, the time to be preparing. So I will stop there at that verse. And now I want to go to Joel, the first chapter, Joel 1. And I'm going to start in verse 4. We know Joel, very interesting book. Just 3 little chapters filled with all end-time things, all about the day of Yahweh, which we're talking about. But here, as we go down to verse 4 of chapter 1, and I can even start in verse 3. Tell your sons about it. Tell your sons to their sons, and their sons to another generation. We know the book of Joel was written many, many years ago, and he's saying, keep telling every generation that's coming until the generation that this is going to be pertinent for. And then he says, what was left by the cutter, the swarming locust ate. And that left of the swarming locust, the locust larva ate. And that left of the locust larva, the stripping locust ate. So he's metaphorically showing, and could be literal also. We know we just had a major locust storm coming from Egypt, coming into Israel. Much bigger than the normal locusts that were coming. And they did destroy a lot of the crops. It's still not over. They're still trying to fight it. It's, every time they think they've got it down, it's showing up in another place. But then what is the result of that? Awake drunkards and weak, and wail all wine drinkers over the grape must, for it is cut off from your mouth. And again, what does he say metaphorically? If all the plants are going to be taken, then also that's including the grapes, which would be destroyed. And as we said many times, very metaphorically that he's speaking, because no wine, no happiness. What is he saying? It's a time of suffering. So when you're hitting into a great famine, there's not a lot of time for having a glass of wine and rejoicing. It just is not happening at that time. For a nation has come up on my land, strong and without number. Its teeth are the teeth of a lion, and it is the jaw teeth of a lioness. There my vine is desolation, and it has splintered my fig tree. He has stripped it and thrown it down, its branches grow white. Wail like a virgin girded with sackcloth over the husband of her youth. The food offering and the drink offering have been cut off from the house of Yahweh. The priests, the ministers of Yahweh mourn. So the famine is so bad that they can't even, not even the priest can even do the food offering that's done in the sanctuary. The field is wasted, the land mourns, for the grain is wasted. The new wine is dried up, the oil tree droops. Be withered farmers, howl vine dressers, for the wheat and for the barley, because the harvest of the field is perished. The vine is dried up and the fig tree droops, the pomegranate, the palm tree, and the apple tree. All the trees of the field are dried up, because joy has dried up from the souls of men. And living here in Israel, we know we've just ended what was one of the worst droughts that they've had in many, many years. It was about a 7-year drought that just ended this year. But we know in Israel you only get a couple of months of rain. And if you don't get rain during that time, and you're going 7 months of heavy, heavy heat and no rain, this is the end result of it. You know, we know it by living here. We know what would happen to our trees if we didn't get the winter rain and then we went 7, 8 months. We'd have no fruit and many of it would die. So this is all, again, leading up to the day of Yahweh, that there is a great famine coming. Now, like I said, metaphorically, it's many ways. We're going to see there's a famine of the word. You know, there's a metaphorically, but literally, it's also talking about food famine in the end time. That there is a food famine in the end time. Let's go to 2 Kings 6. We were just reading 2 Kings 7. So I think this is kind of neat now. We can look and see what preceded what we were going over in the Torah reading. Because I want to just show you from what we just read. Now, we read the good side. We read when Elisha predicted that by tomorrow the famine would be over and the food would come, and it was so unbelievable for them to believe it because of how long this famine was going on and what was happening. We see what happened to the guard who didn't believe it. But let me show you what happened before this, and maybe why that guard was so skeptical. And I'm going to read 2 Kings 6. I'll start in verse 25. And there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they were laying siege to it until the head of a donkey was at 80 silver pieces. Wow. You know, anybody want to have donkey parmesan for meal today? A head of a donkey was at 80 pieces of silver, and the fourth of a cab of dove's dung at 5. So, wow, not even a cab, a fourth of a cab, you know, of dove's dung. So this is showing you, wow, you're in a famine, and you're living in a land that has fruit trees and everything, right? But again, what is this showing? That all these trees must have not been yielding anything if people are eating donkey heads and dove's dung. But it's going to get worse. And it happened, the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, and a woman cried to him, saying, "Save my master, O king." And he said, "If Yahweh does not save you, from where shall I save you? Out of the threshing floor or out of the wine vat?" So he's saying, if Yahweh is not bringing the rain from heaven, what am I going to do? And the king said to her, "What ails you?" And she said, "This woman said to me, 'Give your son, and we will eat him today, and tomorrow we will eat my son.' And we boiled my son and ate him. And I said to her on the next day, 'Give me your son, that we may eat him.' But she hid her son. And it happened when the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his garments, and he was passing by on the wall, and the people looked, and behold, the sackcloth was inside on his flesh." So this is why you see why he said, "I'm going after Elisha," because Elisha was the one calling the drought. Can you imagine getting that bad? That literally, forget about a donkey's head and dung of a bird. You're talking about literally people taking their child and burning it. Josephus talks about this in the war, the 66 to 70 war. Because the way the Romans used to do it, they would build a siege mound around your city. That's what they did with Jerusalem. They'd starve you out. They wouldn't let food in, they wouldn't let food out. And after a couple of years of having no food whatsoever, this is exactly what was happening. So, you know, we know it in the end time. It talks about the same thing. So we're seeing, like I said, for us, it's hard to imagine. You know, we've never been through it. We fasted. Maybe we went without food at a point. But I don't think any of us in this room have ever went long periods of time, maybe a week, 2 weeks, without eating just because there was no food there. Not because we're choosing to do a lemonade fast or something like that, but because there literally is no food there to eat. So, again, wow. You know, our backs are going to be against the wall. You're dealing with the worst famine the world will ever know. And at the end of the day, as we're going to see, for the people of Yahweh, beside the famine, we can't buy or sell. So even if you could find somebody out there that will sell you, you know, the whatever, you know, the hoof of a cow, you're not going to be able to buy it or sell it. Because you're not going to be able to buy and sell unless you take the mark of the beast. So Yahweh did not leave his people, though, defenseless. he warned us about this. And I'd like to go to Genesis 41. We saw a film the other day, a modern day Joseph. Little to be desired of, right? Ancient Joseph, but ancient Joseph was a little to be desired of. You know, like I said, when you look in some of these Bible stories. But there is reason to my madness at times. And what we're going to read here is about Pharaoh. Because Pharaoh's dream, we're going to see from Scripture, something that we call twice-speak. Whenever you see that repeated twice, it's always showing a second fulfillment somewhere. And I think that Yahweh clearly was giving us this, not so much for Pharaoh's time, but it directly correlates with the end time in what we should be doing now. Genesis 41, I'm going to start 1 through 8, and then I'll drop down. And it happened at the end of 2 years of days, Pharaoh was dreaming, and lo, he was standing by the river. And behold, 7 cows were going up from the river, beautiful of appearance and fat of flesh, and they were eating in the reeds. And behold, 7 other cows were going up after them from the river, evil of appearance and lean of flesh, and they were standing beside the cows on the lip of the river. And the evil appearing and lean flesh cows were eating the 7 cows of beautiful and fat appearance, and Pharaoh awoke. And he slept and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain were coming up on one stalk, fat and good. And behold, 7 ears of grain being lean and blasted by the east wind, sprouting forth after them. And the 7 lean ears were swallowing the 7 fat and full ears. And Pharaoh awaked, and behold, it was a dream. And it happened in the morning, his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for the magicians of Egypt and all of its wise men. And Pharaoh told this dream, and there was no interpreter of them to Pharaoh. So, again, you know, he has the dream, there's nobody there to interpret. I'm going to drop down to verse 15 and continue on, because we know they call for Joseph. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. And I have heard about you, saying, you hear a dream to interpret it. And Joseph replied to Pharaoh, saying, not I. Elohim will answer the peace of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, lo, I was standing by the lip of the river. And behold, 7 cows were going up from the river, fat of flesh and beautiful of form, and were feeding in the reeds. And behold, 7 other cows were going up after them, poor and very evil of form and lean of flesh. I have not seen any like them in all the land of Egypt for badness. And the cows, the lean and the evil, ate the first 7 fat cows. And they went into their stomachs, and it could not be seen that they had gone into their stomachs. And their appearance was as evil as the beginning, and I awoken. And I looked in my dream, and behold, 7 ears of grain were coming up on one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears withered, lean, blasted by the east wind. The word is kadima, if there is any correlation, sprouting forth after them. And interesting enough, the word kadima means forward. And like we were saying, in President Obama's election, his campaign thing, and on their campaign is where they make those million signs everybody holds up. The campaign in this election was also forward. It was also kadima, which is just an interesting coincidence maybe. And the lean ears were swallowing the good ears, verse 24, and I spoke to the magicians, but not one is making known the meaning to me. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. Elohim has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows, they are 7 years, and the 7 good ears, they are the 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and evil appearing cows going up after them, they are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted by the east wind will be 7 years of famine. This is the word I spoke to Pharaoh. What Elohim is about to do, he has made Pharaoh say, behold, 7 years of great plenty are coming in all the land of Egypt, and 7 years of famine will arise after them, and all the plenty of the land of Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will consume the land. And the plenty in the land will not be remembered because of that famine afterwards, for it will be very severe. And as to the dream being repeated to Pharaoh twice, the thing is settled because it is from Elohim, and Elohim is hastening to do it. And now let Pharaoh look for a man who is intelligent and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh act, and let him appoint rulers over the land, and take 1/5 of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of plenty. And let them gather all the food of these coming good years. And let them heap up grain under Pharaoh's hand as food in the cities, and let them keep it. And let the food be for a store for the land for the 7 years of famine, which will be in the land of Egypt, and let not the land be cut off by the famine. So, here it is. We have a dream that's a parallel for the end times, and it's pretty simple. There's 7 good years in which all these good things will come, and there'll be a lot of plenty, which I believe are over. I think we had very, very good years, not that far from here. There was a lot of things that were able to be stored. But now we're really getting ready to go into those 7 years of famine. We're not getting ready to go into years of plenty. Like we said, as we're going to see, we're going into war. We're going into the fall of Babylon. We're going into a lot of things that is going to bring this famine that's coming on the world. And believe me when I say it, the leaders that be, the globalists, know it. They've been preparing for this for a long time. They have places that they bought, they have underground cities, they have stores of food, and they're following. They believe it. They have faith that Yahweh's word is going to come to pass. And they've been preparing for it. But my question is, have you been preparing for it? Have you been preparing? And there's spiritual preparation, which we've been going over as Passover is coming. But also there's physical preparation too. You know, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. You know, and how may we stand if we had to go for a month with no food whatsoever? You know, or if we didn't have water or whatever. Remember Israel, 3 days in the desert without water. You know, and they were crying out to Yahweh and really getting ready to string Moses up, so to speak. So the fact that Yahweh gives us, He tells us that we need to prepare. I don't think there's much question about it. I did a message I was telling someone the other day, years and years ago, maybe 15 years ago. Preparation, lack of faith, you know, or faith. Some people say, oh, you just have to believe in Yahweh. Yeah, that's what I do. I believe in Yahweh. I believe a famine's coming. I believe He said to prepare. So if I really believe, I will prepare. It's not a lack of faith. Faith without works is dead. You know, we know that. We know we do our part, and then Yahweh's going to do His part. But if we don't do our part, you know, not only are we setting ourselves up for physical problems, but I'll tell you something. The way that Satan gets us is not through the spiritual. He can't touch the spirit because it belongs to Yahweh. He gets us through the physical. He gets us through physical lusts of different things. He gets us through physical things in our personality that we're not overcoming. You know, like I said many times, that don't give Satan anything that he owns that you're possessing. He possesses anger. He possesses lust. He possesses greed. And if you're owning that, then you're giving him an in to come into you and take what's his. It's the same thing here. If we don't prepare for the times that are coming, when we come under, you know, this temptation, who knows? Who knows? Because none of us have ever been to that situation where we were so hungry that we would burn our child and eat it, like we read in the Bible. But the minute you ever think, oh, I'd never do that, you're done. Self-righteousness, because human nature will do anything. Human nature will do anything. And that's why if we really believe Yahweh's word, if we believe what He says, then of course in the end of the day, we're believing, we're not trying to think we're going to get through this horrible, horrific time by physical means, but we're believing what He's saying and we're preparing because He's telling us to prepare. He's telling us to prepare. So let's continue with the story because there's some very interesting things now that go into the story that also tell us of other things, of the end time and other things with timing. So we already know we got the dual meaning. Let's drop down to verse 53 now, the same chapter. And let's see what happens. And the 7 years of plenty which were in the land of Egypt were ended. Time goes quick, right? And the 7 years of famine began to come, according as Joseph has said. And the famine was in the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. Why was there bread? Because people believed. Just like we were talking about in the other story. You know, the people with the faith were the ones bringing the good news. The guy who didn't believe was trampled at the gate. So, what side will we be on? There was bread in Egypt because the people believed. And all the land of Egypt hungered, and the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all Egypt, go to Joseph. What he says to you do. And the famine was on the face of the land, and Joseph opened all that which was in them and sold to the Egyptians. And the famine was strong in the land of Egypt, and all the earth came to Egypt to buy to Joseph for the famine was strong in all the earth. And I believe that Yahweh is giving us here a parallel for what's going to happen in the end time with the New World Order, with the global government. Because what we're seeing here, this global government is causing this famine. It's not something that's an accident. They're causing the famine, and they're causing it for a reason. Because they know, number one, is we're going to see exactly what happens with Joseph. As long as people are independent, you can't control them. But we're going to see little by little exactly how Pharaoh controlled not only Egypt, but controlled all the world through a 7-year famine. So now what happens next? Two years are over, right? We go through 2 years of over, and it's bad, but it's not the worst. People still have some money, as we see. They're still buying the grain. But it's still, there's a famine. They can't get it on their own anymore. All the resources are cut off. So at least the people that had some resources, they're able to get some. And now after the first 2 years of the 7-year period, what happens? Joseph is revealed. Joseph is revealed to Israel in the 3rd year of the 7-year cycle. Let's go to Genesis 45 and see this. And I believe it could be a parable to when Israel's eyes will be opened to the Messiah. Verse 1 of Genesis 45, and Joseph was not able to control himself in regard to those standing beside him. And he called out, cause every man to go out from me. And no man stood before him as Joseph was making himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? And his brothers were not able to answer him, for they trembled before him. And Joseph said to his brothers, now come near to me. And they came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be grieved, let not anger be in your eyes, because you sold me here. For Elohim sent me before you to save life. And isn't it interesting? Isn't it the same we read in Zechariah 12:10? They will look upon me whom they have pierced, and they mourn for him. And what's Yeshua going to tell them? The same thing he's telling them here. No, you didn't crucify me. Don't mourn over this. You know, Yahweh the Father sent me down to save life. That's exactly the reason why I had to come down to die. But his eyes will be opened. Scripture says it to Judah at a certain time. And then verse 6, for the famine has been in the midst of the land for 2 years. And there are still 5 years in which no plowing and harvest will be. So will Yeshua be opened to the nation in the 3rd year of the 7? Maybe. Maybe. There's a good indication as we read this. And Elohim sent me before you to put a remnant in the land for you and to keep alive for you a great deliverance. And now you did not send me here, but Elohim. And he has placed me for a father to Pharaoh and for a master in all the house and a ruler in all the land. Hurry and go to my father and say to him, so says your son Joseph, Elohim has placed me as a master to all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. And you shall live in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your sons and your sons' sons and your herds and your flocks and all you have. And I will nourish you there, for there is still 5 years of famine, lest you be made poor, you and your house, and all which abides in you. So we see he's revealed to them. We know that Goshen in Scripture is a type of the Promised Land. We can look in Exodus 8. Exodus 8 and verse 20. And Yahweh said to Moses, get up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh. Behold, he is about to go to the water. And say to him, so says Yahweh, send away my people that they may serve me. And if you do not send away my people, behold, I am about to send swarms of flies on you, and on your servants and your people and your house, and the house of the Egyptians will be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground on which you are. And in that day I will separate the land of Goshen with my people resting on it, that there be no swarm of flies, so that you may know that I am Yahweh in the midst of the earth. And I will put a distinction between my people and your people. This miracle shall be to you tomorrow. So we do see there is precedent in the Bible that Goshen is a type of the Promised Land when we're looking in the Exodus account. Even when there's darkness on Ramses, but there's light in Goshen. So he's telling them to come down. You know, is this a prototype of the people starting to come back to the land of Israel. There's a very good possibility it could be. Then we go back to Genesis 45. In verse 21 and 22. And the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave wagons to them according to the mouth of Pharaoh, and he gave provisions to them for the way. He gave to all of them, to each, changes of clothing. He gave to them changes of clothing. What do we know in Revelation 7, right? Who is this great multitude that comes out of tribulation? They're the ones who have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. We know also from Exodus 28 that the priests were given new clothing when they entered the priesthood. And you shall take to yourself your brother Aaron and his sons with him from among the sons of Israel for him to serve as priest to me. Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron. And you shall make holy garments for your brother Aaron for glory and for beauty. And you shall speak to all the wise-hearted whom I have filled with the spirit of wisdom, and they shall make the garments of Aaron to sanctify him for his serving as priest to me. So we see, whenever we see this, that new garments are given. You know, it is an indication of priesthood. We see the same thing in Revelation 19. In verse 7, let us rejoice and let us exult, and we will give glory to him, because the marriage of the Lamb came, and his wife prepared herself. And it was given to her that she be clothed in fine linen, pure and bright, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And he said to me, blessed are the ones having been called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said, these words of Yahweh are true. So we see here an indication that they're getting new clothing. They're believing in Messiah. He's being revealed. And they're getting new garments. And then what happens? He comes to Israel. The sons come to Israel. And we see in verse 26, and they told him, saying, Joseph is alive. Joseph is alive. Verse 28, the same thing. And Israel said, it is enough. My son Joseph is alive. I will go and see him before I die. So what is it showing? That if Israel is going to get new clothing, they have to believe in the resurrection. You know, Messiah ben Yosef, Messiah ben David. And it's a point now where Israel is believing. Israel is believing. Joseph is alive. Now, here it is. You know, he could have been like the third sergeant at the door, right? And said, no way. No way can Joseph be alive. How can Joseph be alive? But no, he believed. He believed in the resurrection. Joseph is alive. He said, that's enough. That's enough. That's all I need to hear. I'm going to go. I'm going to follow. So will it be many of the people that are in the nations, many of the Jews at that time, when they hear the Messiah is in Israel, will they say the same? It is enough. We're going to the land. Will it be the beginning of the regathering, the beginning of the coming back? And possibly in the third year. But there's still 5 years left now. There's still 5 years left. So let's look at the rest of the story from Genesis and see what else it tells us. Because remember, it was Babylon and this whole New World Order that created this famine, because that's their plan. Their plan is to enslave every man, woman, and child on the planet. So let's look at what's done next. Genesis 47 and verse 12. This is now the third year. And Joseph nourished his father and his brothers and all his father's house with bread for the mouth of the little ones. And no bread was in the land, because the famine was exceedingly severe. And the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan were completely burned up from the famine. And Joseph gathered all the silver found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan in return for the grain they were buying. So now in year 3, all the money is gone. So again, remember we said, you know, try to be wise. Right now we already see they're confiscating people's money out of the banks. You know, so maybe you put it in your mattress. Maybe you don't feel that paper money will be any good, so you're going to buy gold coins, right? So up until year 3, that's a good strategy. But in year 3, that's it. Money doesn't help you anymore. After the third year, and we're going to see why. So he gathered up all the silver and the grain they were buying, and Joseph brought in the silver to the house of Pharaoh. And the silver failed from the land of Egypt and from the land of Canaan. And all Egypt came into Joseph, saying, give us bread, and why should we die before you, for the silver failed? So like I said, if you're wise and if you're preparing, you can get up to the 3rd year or the 7th year, but in the 3rd year, that's going to be it. There'll be no more money. There'll be nothing else, for the silver has failed. We know in Ezekiel 7, in verse 19, what does it say? In Ezekiel, the first 9 chapters, again, is all parallel to this, to the end times. They will throw their silver in the streets, and their gold shall be an impure thing. Their silver and their gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of Yahweh. And the wrath of Yahweh has not happened here yet. That's at the end of this 7-year period. They shall not satisfy their souls, and they shall not fill their bowels, and their iniquity has become a stumbling block for them. So like I said, and it's interesting, now you're in the 3rd year, and what happens after the 3.5 years? What happens in midpoint of this is, we'll see. The 4th year, Genesis 47. Now we're into the 4th year of the 7 years. And Joseph said, give your livestock, and I will give you and your livestock if your silver is failed. So now anything you have left, maybe people's children, they'll be selling. They're already doing it today. Your cattle, your livestock, and then drop down to verse 21. And as far as the people, he caused them to pass over into the cities, and from the end of the border of Egypt to its other end. Only he did not buy the land of the priests, for Pharaoh had appointed a portion for the priests, and they usually ate their appointed portion, which Pharaoh gave them. For this reason, they did not sell their land. Behold, I have brought you here in your land today. Behold, here is seed for you, and to sow your land. So interesting enough, the only people during this time that are being protected are the priests. They're the only people that aren't paying this 20% tax. They're the only people that's not having it confiscated. So how important is it by this time to have priestly garments on, right? To be a priest during this time. We know from Revelation 18, verse 13, it talks about Babylon is made slaves of the souls of men. And that's what we're seeing here. That since they have no money left, people are literally selling themselves as slaves. They're saying, look, what good is anything? Whatever, we don't want to die. Whatever you want, we will do at this point. Verse 26, and Joseph made it a law until this day on the land of Egypt. The 5th part is for Pharaoh, only the land of the priests being accepted, it did not become Pharaoh's. So we already saw in the Exodus account, Yahweh makes a distinction between his people and the worldly people. So that's why I said, is this going to be a horrible time? Absolutely. Is it going to be a very bad time? Yes. Does it even say that there'll be a great martyrism and Satan will be allowed to martyr many of the saints? Yes. But it also says that Yahweh still makes a distinction between his people and the worldly people. And that's why, what side do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the side of the New World Order, or do you want to be on the side of Yahweh? Like I said, many people that I talk to in Babylon that say, I'll never take the mark of the beast, they've already taken it. They work in the system. They live in the system. They watch the movies of the system. They go on all the internet things of the system. Or they're friends of the system. So, as a man thinks, so he is. And if everything of your life is the beast power system, then you've already taken the mark of the beast. It's that simple. So this is where Yahweh is clearly making a distinction between the two. Verse 25, go back to verse 25. And now the people said, you have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the eyes of my master, and we will become slaves to Pharaoh. Now isn't it interesting? Pharaoh was no different. Pharaoh wasn't some kind of Elohim or something else. What made Pharaoh different than the rest of the people now that are becoming slaves? Because Pharaoh believed the prophecy. And Pharaoh prepared. That's the only difference. Pharaoh took those 7 years and he prepared. I've had people from the last 30 years of my life, brethren, say, tell me when the end is. Well, it might not be for another 10. Oh, good. Then I can stay in the system. I can be in the system. Just let me know 6 months before it's going to come. And then I'm going to try to get myself together. It ain't going to work that way. Like I said, I got a message I'm going to give a Pesach on justification, sanctification, glorification. And it's not something you work up like a light switch. It's something you clothe yourself on. It's something you live one way or the other. Now we're entering this time. We're entering this time of worldly famine and famine of the word, both sides. So we need to prepare. We need to be preparing physically as well as spiritually. So the people now in the 4th year, they become slaves. But there's still, 3.5 years left at this point. There's still 3.5 years left of this 7-year famine. If we go to Revelation 13, isn't it kind of interesting the parallel we see of Revelation 13 to what we're reading here? Because, as we just read in Genesis 47:25, the people welcomed the slavery. They were happy. They were happy for the fact that Pharaoh was able to give them food. Now, my question is, when Pharaoh was saving all this food up for the 7 good years, why didn't he tell anybody? Why didn't he tell them in Canaan? Why didn't he tell them in other places? Why did they send out? There's going to be a famine in the world. Everybody save food. The same way why the New World Order isn't telling you to prepare. Because they want to enslave you. They want to enslave you. And the best way you can enslave people is by taking everything they own away, having the bank system fail, everything else, and then, like a little mouse, give you a morsel of foods if you obey what they said. And if you don't obey, like we saw, what's going to happen? They pop the cyanide chip, that's in your hand. Revelation 13 and verse 5. And a mouth speaking great things and blasphemy was given to the beast, and authority was given to him to act 42 months. So isn't it interesting, in Joseph's dream, exactly halfway through the 7 years is when the enslavery of the people came. And here in Revelation, what does he say? He's going to act for 42 months. That's 3.5 years. The same thing. And it opened its mouth in blasphemy toward Yahweh to blaspheme his name and his dwelling place and those dwelling in heaven. And it was given to it to make war with the saints and overcome them. And authority was given to it over every tribe and kindred and tongue and nation. And to those dwelling on the earth, and all those dwelling on the earth will worship him, the anti-Messiah, the beast system. Those of whom the names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, having been slain from the foundation of the world. And then you go down to verse 15. And it was given to it to put life into the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might speak, and might cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And the small and the great, and the rich and the poor, and the freemen and the slaves, it causes that they give to them all a mark on their right hand and on their foreheads, even that not any could buy or sell, except the one having the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of its name. Here is wisdom, let him who has understanding compute the number of the beast. For it's the number of a man, its number is 666. 6 is the number of man. 3 sixes, 3 is the number of unity. So 666 is mankind unified. It's the Tower of Babel complete. It's the Tower of Babel succeeding. It's man's unity to himself without Yahweh. Yahweh's number, as we know, is 7, the number of completeness. 6 is the number of man. 3 sixes is man's unity to himself. And that's why whenever you see a trinity, what do you see? You see this triangle that's unified by itself without Yahweh. So like I said, very, very, very interesting though. How the same here in Revelation. These people aren't being forced. They're worshiping the beast. Why? Because you know what? He was giving us food. The old order out of chaos. They're not telling you they created the situation the same way Pharaoh didn't tell the people that he created the situation, by not giving them the information to prepare beforehand. Back to Genesis 47. Very encouraging scripture in verse 27. Genesis 47 and verse 27. And Israel lived in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen. Like we said, Goshen is a type of promised land. It's separated. And they owned in it, and were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly. So here it is. While all the world is taking the mark of the beast and doesn't have food, the people of Yahweh that trusted in him, who prepared, for what? They're prospering. Just like the scripture that Eric talked about in Daniel. The people who know Elohim, Daniel 11, they will work and do exploits. They will work and do exploits. But it's because they prepared. Because they prepared for what's coming because they had faith and believed in the word of Yahweh. If we go to the book of Amos, Amos 4, verse 7. It says, "And I have also withheld the rain from you when it was yet 3 months to the harvest. And I caused rain to fall in one city, and caused it not to rain on another city. One piece was rained on, and the piece where it did not rain was dried up." And we see that here. You know, there's times where it will be pouring, raining here. We go 10 minutes outside our place, and there's no rain. So Yahweh clearly shows that in this day, you know, He can have rain come in one place and rain not come on another place. So for His people that are trusting in Him, for His people that are being obedient, for His people that are not being part of this worldly system, Yahweh will care for them. But like I said, believe me, for somebody who's been out of the system for almost 15 years, it ain't easy. It ain't easy to get out, and it ain't easy to stay out. And it takes a long time to fight it. And if you're not going to do it, you cannot do it overnight. If the system collapses tomorrow, and people are 99% dependent on that system, they will do anything. When the little radio comes on, you get that little beep, beep. This is the emergency broadcast system. Everybody stay in your house and listen for what we're going to tell you next. You know, and they'll listen. They'll do whatever it is. Whatever they need to do to get on that bread line, to get money to get their medicine. Most people are on, you know, medicines that they have to get. So they know this is something that's been planned for a long, long time. And now we're in the end. We're in the end of this last generation. And if you are part of that system, if you are dependent on that system, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have big trouble, and you're going to risk not being one of the ones that Yahweh is raining on your city, but being on the other side, where they're taking the mark of the beast. Amos 8, 11 and 12. "Behold, the days are coming, declares Adonai Yahweh, that I will send a famine into the land. Not a famine for bread nor thirst for water, but rather a famine for hearing of the word of Yahweh. And they will stagger from sea to sea, and from north even to east. They shall roam about to seek the word of Yahweh, and they shall not find it." I also say that this message will go to many thousands of people all over the world. If you're one of those fence sitters right now, you know, you're not always going to have the word of Yahweh to hear. You're not always going to be able to have the internet to go on to hear it. You know, you're not always going to have congregations to be in. So while you have this word now, take advantage of it. Take advantage of it. Read it every day. You might not have a physical Bible. Remember, you know, it's only a few hundred years that the printing presses came. Most people throughout time did not have their own personal copy of a Bible. It would only be in the synagogue or in the sanctuary of Yahweh. And the fact that we have it now, shame on us if every day we're not taking advantage of that. If we're not reading it. Because once you read it, it's in your memory bank. It's like a computer. You're putting it in there. And just like we read about in the underground congregation, when your Bible's taken away, it'll be in your mind, and the Holy Spirit can bring it into remembrance. So even if you think you can't remember, you're not going to have to remember. The same way Yahweh says, you'll go before kings and governors. Don't think what you're going to say. I will put the words in your mouth. But He can't put what you don't have. And that's why it's important that every day we need to be in the Scriptures. Amos 8, go back to verse 9 and 10. "And it shall be in that day, declares Adonai Yahweh, that I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in the light of the day. And I will turn your feast to mourning, and all your songs into dirge, and I will bring up sackcloth on all loins, and baldness on every head. And I will also make it like the mourning for an only one, and the end of it shall be like a bitter day." So praise Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. You know, like I said, in these end times, He's opened up again in Jerusalem a feast where His people can come and go together. And for the thousands of people that have been with us at the feast here in Jerusalem, you know, over the last 10, 11 years, it's changed many people's lives. And for people thinking about it, come, because we don't know. There'll be a time where the feast will be cut off. You know, and I know for myself, my memories from being here and what's instilled, I know that is a major, major cornerstone that will help me get through these times. It's a major cornerstone that has built my faith. Going around Israel, seeing the places of the Bible, seeing how real they are, understanding the reality of it from from seeing it and hearing it from true archaeologists compared to reading it from a Greek perspective. And all of us know it helps us to understand the truth. Going to the Red Sea crossing site, where the chariot wheels are found. And we don't know. We don't know how many more years are going to be here, because like he says, the feast is going to stop. I'll read here in Luke 21. Let's read about what's going to happen, unfortunately, in Jerusalem in these days ahead. Luke 21 and verse 12. Because it's not going to be memories of Babylon that's going to get you through the end time. And it certainly is not going to be memories of Babylon that's going to build your faith. It's going to be memories of truth. It's going to be solid, solidifying with other true believers that are filled with faith. That's the thing that's going to help you. Luke 21 and verse 12. But before these things they will lay hands on you and persecute you. And they will deliver you to the assemblies and the prisons, and they will bring you before kings and governors because of my name. But it will return to you for a testimony. Then then put into your hearts not to premeditate to make a defense, for I will give you a mouth and a wisdom which all those opposing you will not be able to withstand or contradict, just like we were just talking about. And your parents and your brothers and your relatives and your friends will betray you, and they will kill some of you. And you will be hated by all because of my name. And a hair of your head shall in no way perish. By your patience you will gain your souls. And when you see Jerusalem being encircled by armies, then recognize that its destruction has come near. Then let those in Judea flee to the mountains, and those in the midst let them go out. And those in the villages let them not go into her. For these are days of vengeance, when all things which have been written are to be fulfilled. And as now we're going up in a few days up to Jerusalem for Pesach. We should really think about that, because you never know when it might be the last time. It might be because of this happening, or it might just be because we might not be here. But we should appreciate every single time that Yahweh allows us to partake with His set-apart feasts in His set-apart city. So, how long before this happens? Definitely Joseph's dream is a parallel. There's great things in here as we're learning today. But how long? Does the Bible give us any indication on how long it could be before we can be looking at that? Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to read a little article first, and then I'd like to go in a couple of scriptures. Because, again, no man knows the day or the hour, and I don't think Yahweh purposely doesn't want us to pinpoint exact dates in anything, because all it does is help us to delay then if it's not close. But Yahweh definitely with many things gives us signs, and He gives us indications so that we can prepare. Because with something like this that's so important, how could He not give us an indication? Because then we wouldn't know when to prepare. Because if you prepared 80 years ago, everything you prepared would have rotted away. Well, your food and everything, or whatever else you're preparing. So you need to know. So I'm going to read, this is an article just coming out in the last couple of months, and it talks about an early warning for a famine in 2013. It says, in 2011, according to the United Nations, some 12.4 million people in Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, and Djibouti were affected by chronic hunger, and tens of thousands of people died from starvation. Working jointly with Africa's corrupt dictators, these multinationals aim to liberate the land from Africans, just like the 19th century scramble for Africa. But will they really liberate Africa from the scourge of hunger, famine, starvation, and poverty? And again, why is Africa not allowed to sell their goods on the open market? Because Africa is controlled by the New World Order, as anywhere else on earth is. But Africa is a very fertile place, but the food will be controlled as it is today. If you live in Africa and you have thousands of acres of land, you can't just say, you know what, I'm going to plant coffee here and sell it to these people over here in Chicago. They won't let you. They say, no, we'll allow you to plant tea, and we'll give you 10 cents for every 1,000 kilos. Like I said, we met people there. They put their baby on their back. They'd work 10, 12 hours in the field to make maybe 25 cents, 50 cents in a day. So that's the way it is. And then it says here, the rest of the article says, 2013 as a year of catastrophic global food crises. Scientists are predicting that 2013 will be a year of serious global crises, with significant food shortages and price hikes. The crisis is triggered by recent droughts in the main grain-producing countries, including the United States of America, Russia, and Australia. According to the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, 80% of the U.S. has undergone some drought or abnormally dry conditions last year. This has resulted in significant loss of corn, wheat, soybean crops, and is expected to reduce exports of grain and trigger increased prices on the global commodity markets. The crisis will inflict the double whammy on the food importing countries of Africa. Increases in commodity prices, food and energy, will have a disproportionate impact on large vulnerable populations in Ethiopia because the impoverished households typically spend more than half their total incomes on food. We have a lot of brethren down there, and believe me when I say, they're taking it serious. We're trying to help them. We're trying to expand Joseph's storehouse that we have here in Israel and help these people to get them ready. And they believe it. They believe that it's coming, and they know what's coming. We also know financial collapse. And like I say, it's a joke when people want to mention the stock market, making new highs every day. Well, of course, if you had a printing press and you can print $85 billion on paper and put it into the stock market every month, then you could also play that little monopoly game that they play. But in reality, every financial guru, every major financial person knows there's a collapse coming. And the fact that the balance sheets are so out of whack right now, like I said, normally the Federal Reserve, which is not part of the federal government, but they're the ones making the monetary policy, normally they have about $200 billion on their books, which means that's bonds that they're holding from America in return that they print paper. Now it's more than $4.5 trillion. From a normal aspect of about 200 billion, they have 4.5 trillion, and every month openly they're just printing and printing and printing. And the people in the stock market are just waiting for them to say when they're going to stop, and then the crash will come. And it's inevitable. It's inevitable. And anybody who thinks it's not, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn if you'd like to buy it also. Because believe me when I say it, there is a great financial collapse, and it's not that far away. World War III, we know also. It's not that far away. We don't know. It could be in days or weeks, or it could be in a year or two. But we know we are in a different time now. We know where these things are going to come together, and probably the financial collapse and the war and the famine will all come together because one brings the other. The same as we see in the time of the Exodus. That if you have water turning to blood and all the fish that are dying, and that's going to bring flies, which is going to bring disease, and all these things multiply one on top of another. We see the same thing today. We see that the famine in the last couple of years has been growing worse, and this year they're expecting it to be the worst. Food supplies to be getting less. And as we said, it's not like it was before. Most people are not growing their own food. Most people do not have storehouses of this. So even if it was just a hurricane or something, what happens? Boom. Within 24 hours, stores are completely out of everything. And that's why, if we believe in Yahweh, it's only wise that we prepare. Not just for ourselves, but for other people out here. As we were saying, what's going to happen if we're here in Israel as this crisis happens, when our brother Judah's come into faith? We for years, we had a homeless ministry. And before we would ever give a Bible or preach to the people, we'd always fill their belly first. We're not going to hold them hostage and say, I'm only going to give you a sandwich if you let me tell you this Bible scripture. No. We bring them nice, hot sandwiches, good, fresh cold cuts, and after their belly is full, then they're appreciative and they say, hey, tell me, you have a Bible? I want to hear more. But to a hungry person, the physical is going to come before the spiritual. So we have to think the same way. If we love other people, then we should be preparing for them as well for us. Ezekiel 3:17. Ezekiel 3:17 says, Son of man, I have made you as a watchman for the house of Israel, and hear the word of my mouth and warn them from me. I have made you a watchman for Israel. And like we said, one of the things that Yahweh and Yeshua in the New Testament told us to do is watch. That's why we're watching world events. That's why we're watching for all the things he said. But also, beside physically looking, a watchman also tells time. A watchman tells time. So what time does the Bible indicate to us? Give us some sort of possibility. Let's look at a scripture to see. Isaiah 29 in verse 1 and 2. Isaiah 29 verse 1 and 2 says, "Woe to Ariel." Interesting, the only time in scripture that Jerusalem is ever called Ariel. Ariel means lion. Is it an indication of the closeness to the Lion of Judah, coming back to reclaim the city? Woe to Ariel, the city where David camped, and year to year, let the feasts run their circle. Why are we doing that? We're having year to year and year to year. We said there's a point where the feast will run its circle. There'll be no more feasts in Jerusalem. Those in Judea flee to the mountains. Then I will compress Ariel, just like we said, when Jerusalem is encircled, compressed by armies, and there will be mourning and sorrow, and it shall be to me as to Ariel. So Yahweh tells us pretty clearly, let the feasts run their cycle. What is he talking about? We know that the calendar is a solar-lunar calendar. The months go by the moon, and the moon cycle is 235 months. It's a 19-year cycle, and then it repeats itself. So this current moon cycle runs out in 2016. 2017 starts a new cycle. It's interesting because that year 2017 keeps coming up over and over and over again. A lot of interesting things with 2017. The other thing is 2016, 2015 to 2016 is a sabbatical year. What do we do in a sabbatical year? You don't plant and you don't grow. And it's take a lot of faith. If famine is coming, maybe you're even in the second year of the famine, and now it comes and we're not even going to plant anything, not even a garden. Because we're going to trust in Yahweh. But what does he say? You trust in me and you keep your land fallow. Not only will you have food in the 6th and the 7th year, you'll have it in the 8th year going into the 9th year. So 2015-16 is a sabbatical. 2017 starts the new 19-year time cycle. Another interesting thing is that from 1947, November 30th, was when the United Nations voted on Jerusalem to become a nation. 2017 will be exactly 70 years. 70 years of Jerusalem being a nation. If we look at Zechariah 1, now, although it's been a great blessing for Jerusalem to be a nation again, it's been a great blessing for us to keep the feast there, but I think all of us will admit it's been no picnic. It's been no picnic. From day one, there's been wars, there's been fighting, just like it says in Zechariah 8, every man is against his neighbor. And you can't say, if you look at Jerusalem today, that Yahweh's blessing has really been there. It's extremely secular, And let's look what it says in Zechariah, though, because Zechariah is a really interesting book, because Zechariah is tying from the Second Temple times, going all the way to the end time, and tying it together. And there's a lot of symbolism in the book, but there's a lot of really, really important prophecies in Zechariah for the end time. So if we start in verse 12, and the messenger of Yahweh answered me and said, O Yahweh of hosts, until when will you not have pity on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which you have cursed these 70 years? And again, because Jerusalem has not been obedient to Yahweh, and the religious there has not been obedient, they have been cursed these 70 years. So what is he saying? And Yahweh answered the messenger who was talking with me with good words, words of comfort. So the messenger who was talking with me said, cry out, saying, so says Yahweh of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem, and for Zion with a great jealousy, and with great anger. And I am angered at the haughty nations, in which I was a little angry, and they gave help for anger. Why? Because Jerusalem wants to be divided. Yahweh's plan is bringing Jerusalem back, bringing the people back there, and the plan of the New World Order is to divide it. So Yahweh says this, I have returned to Jerusalem with compassions. My house shall be built in it, says Yahweh of hosts, and a line shall be stretched over Jerusalem. Cry out again, saying, so says Yahweh of hosts, my city shall again overflow with goodness, and Yahweh shall yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem. But there is a point of 70 years first, where Yahweh does allow them to go through persecution, and he allows them to go through suffering. Zechariah 8, in verse 7. So says Yahweh of hosts, behold, I will save my people from the land of the rising sun and from the land of the setting sun. And I will bring them, and they shall live in the midst of Jerusalem. And they shall be for a people to me, and I will be their Elohim in truth and righteousness. Didn't we read in Joseph's dream? During the 3rd year, that's when the people from the nations start coming back to the land. Just like he's saying here. So says Yahweh of hosts, let your hands be made strong, you who hear in these days these words by the mouth of the prophets, that in the day the house of Yahweh of hosts is founded, the sanctuary is to be rebuilt. So definitely we know the time frame of it, end time. For before those days, the days we're living in now, there was no payment for man, nor was there payment for animal, and there was no peace to him from the adversary who went out or came in. For I sent every man a man against his neighbor, exactly like we're seeing today. But now I will not be to the remnant of this people as the former days, says Yahweh of hosts. For there shall be peace for the seed, the vine shall give its fruit, famine will be ended, and the ground shall give its produce, and the heavens shall give their dew, and I will cause the remnant of this people to inherit these. And it shall be as you were a curse among the nations, O house of Judah and house of Israel, so I will save you, and you shall be a blessing. Do not fear, let your hands be made strong. So, it's encouraging, we know at the end. Also, interesting enough, from 1967, when Jerusalem was actually given back to the Jews at that time, it will be exactly 50 years, 2017, one Jubilee. And also from 1917, the end of World War I and the Balfour Declaration, the very first paper that was set out to make a state of Israel again, will be exactly 100 years, 2017. So it's kind of interesting when you look at this generation will not pass, and like we said, there's several ways you can rule a generation. 2017 fits 3 years of that. It fits 70 years for Israel being a nation. It fits 50 years, a jubilee for Jerusalem being in the hands of Judah, and it fits 100 years from the time of the Balfour Declaration, the first time that Israel was set out to be a nation again. So I think these things are interesting to look at. We're not predicting, but we're watching. We're watching. And as we see many of the things Yeshua talks about in Matthew 24 coming to pass, I don't think anyone can deny we are at least in the beginning of sorrows. We're at least in the beginning of sorrows, and we may be very, very close to be going into these last 7 years of famine. Great famine is coming. It will not start so bad. Like we said, the first couple of years, for those who are pretty smart, they'll be able to use some of their money, and it will be better than the people who have nothing. But we know, like we said, by the midpoint of that 7 years from the dream in Pharaoh, the money was all done, the people became slaves, exactly like the mark of the beast in Revelation 13. We must heed Joseph's warning and prepare now. Yahweh put that in there. There's several chapters on a pharaoh, a pagan pharaoh from Egypt. One little dream. And we have several chapters. We have 5 or 6 chapters all dealing with this situation. And there's good reason for it. Because in the end time, it can be life or death. And we don't want to allow the physical to take away the spiritual. So if we believe Yahweh, I believe that we should be preparing, and like I said, not just for ourselves, but for our brothers and sisters. And like I said, I have the responsibility and the opportunity to be helping our third world brethren, to be preparing the people in Africa, to be preparing the people in Philippines. As a matter of fact, our yearly budget in all these third world countries, they're taking 10% of their budget, all putting it aside for food. And there's always famine in these places, so no matter what, it's only going to help them. Because, I've said it in the very beginning, even when we started working with the third world brethren, I said I'm more than happy to help with everything, but the first thing we do is we make sure that there is nobody in the congregation that is hungry. We want to make sure the widows are taken care of, we want to make sure the orphans are taken care of, and we want to make sure that people have food. And then secondarily, and as just important, we take the good news to the world. But the first thing we do is we have to prepare. So like I said, for us that are not in that dire situation, it may not seem as urgent, but it is. But for these people, they understand it, because they're living in the hub of where it's happening. So, a famine is coming, but remember, after the famine is the feast, the wedding feast of Yahweh. And I think overall, although it's a serious message, It's a message of encouragement, and I think it really fits into the whole Passover message of spiritual preparation and physical preparation. So Yahweh bless.